The massive increase in referrals, which Stella's already showed us, of children and adolescents to the Tavistock services, GIS. I won't show the bar chart again because you've shown it, but basically it goes from 80 to 2,800 over a period of about 9 years. This massive increase has caused many, has many sources, which I'll discuss in a moment. But the staff who came to me were very concerned about very particular things. For example, the recruitment of staff with very low levels of clinical knowledge and skill, particularly as regards complex disorders in childhood and adolescence. Because of the huge numbers, the need to sort of cut to limit the budget by recruiting lower level staff. Many of those staff had had little or no previous exposure to complex serious disorders in childhood. Other issues that were raised were huge caseloads, perhaps over 100, 140, some mentioned. One psychotherapist said that, family therapist told me that in his previous job, where he'd seen hundreds of children over the years, if you just said one thing like the one whose father was a cab driver and died suddenly, he said, I really remember everything about that kid. But these kids, he said, he can't remember anything because the service felt much more like all the children were the same because they all came with a script and the script wasn't sufficiently interrogated. So it all became one kind of blur. They thought there were unresolved serious ethical issues of what constitutes informed consent in minors. We could discuss that maybe more later. The risk to young children and adolescents of hormonal and surgical interventions without adequate assessment or time or thinking space. None of the adolescents underwent surgery until they were adult, but there are many kids who start on the waiting list as adolescents, but by the time they get near to being seen, they're 18 and sent to the adult service where there's virtually no psychological scrutiny at all. This is all particularly important given the lack of any evidence for safety of the medication, and given now that 98% of pubertal children progress from so-called puberty blockers to opposite sex hormones. And thus, starting them on puberty blockers is putting them on the road to opposite sex hormones and to surgery. Services submit, indeed encourage submission to powerful politicized lobbies who often are very closely involved in the service, such as Mermaids and Stonewall. And the staff had a great fear of being called transphobic. This closed down space for thought, doubt, and exploration. Many staff, there were staff who were taken off cases because they were worried that the child was gay, and they were told that they were just causing difficulties and were taken off the case. Some workers have emphasized to me the problem of guilt in the parents. I think this is quite an interesting one. That is, whenever a child is disturbed, it is inevitable that parents feel guilty, of course. Very painful business, often excessively so, very often. However, if the child announces they are trans and the implication is that this is a biological rather than a psychological issue, then parents in some cases will feel relieved of guilt. Not everyone has due strength. Such parents may actively campaign for the child to transition very quickly, saying they want closure here, and are often very intransigent if any doubts are raised. The implication here is that if the child is not trans, if the problem is, so to speak, elsewhere, the parents are again faced with what may be unbearable guilt. On the other hand, there are parents who express doubt and reluctant to proceed quickly, as Jude has discussed, and are often threatened or marginalized in the ways that she has described. Thus, while it is clear that we are dealing with a highly complex problem with many causal pathways and no single causative factor, gender services tend towards a very damaging, peculiar, superficial simplification.